Hello and welcome to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Kieft alongside Ronnie Dahl in the studios of Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM, our flagship TV and radio stations. In addition, today we're on 88.1 WBFH The Biff and Birmingham Area Municipal Access in Birmingham, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, and the village of Franklin. Also today on the web, civiccentertv.com. Click on our Watch Live link on the homepage or watch from the small player that is on the top right on our homepage as well. And online on the Facebook page of the Walled Lake Consolidated School District, and we thank them for joining us on today's edition of the Oakland County Megacast. We are standing by as we are waiting at 10, it was scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock. It will be beginning shortly. There's going to be a joint media call between the FDA and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention regarding a breaking story this morning. If we can, Ronnie, just go through that story before we get to this press conference, as we are still standing by for that beginning today. So
the U.S. is recommending a pause in administration of the single-dose Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine to investigate reports of potentially dangerous blood clots. So in a joint statement this morning, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, along with the FDA, said it was investigating clots in 6 women in the days after vaccination in combination with reduced platelet counts. So more than 6.8 million doses of the J&J vaccine have been administered here in the United States. With that, because we do know a lot of college campuses, along with local health departments, are using the J&J. They have announced that many of them will be suspending the use of the J&J vaccine as of right now for people who had appointments scheduled. They are, at least the ones through the health department, they are continuing those appointments with either Pfizer or Moderna, but some of the college campuses are going to suspend depending on, however many doses they have of some of the other vaccines. So if you were scheduled to get the vaccine, you need to check with the provider to see if you're still going to be able to get one today.
Yeah, definitely a serious situation if the FDA and the CDC are recommending or are requesting, in this case, putting in place a suspended rollout of these vaccines. Of course, it's only been 6 cases as of it was recorded this morning of those blood clots among the large number of Johnson & Johnson vaccines that have been administered. So it's a relatively small number, but for there to be a pause being put on that, or recommended and required in this case by the Centers for Disease Control and the FDA, it's got to be something serious, and it'll be good to get some more details from them in the coming minutes. We are still awaiting that joint media call to begin, Ronnie, as the CDC will be joining the FDA on their YouTube page, and we'll take that press conference here on the Megacast as well.
So, Tyler, I've spent the last few days trying to track down the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, if you go to vaccinefinder.org, we've been telling you about this website, and it's supposed to be able to help you try and find a vaccine. So now how it's changed is they have links to the 3 different vaccines, and you can click all of them, one of them, or both of them for whichever vaccine you want to get. And then it will list the entities, the pharmacies around you that are offering those vaccines. So yesterday I must have called a good 20 different places that said it was in stock. And it turned out it wasn't in stock once you actually went on to try to make an appointment. But then it turns out today, the big breaking news this morning about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, you got to keep in mind, too, Tyler, this is on top of the screw-up at the factory when they were making the J&J.
Yes.
And so there was already going to be a massive shortage of the J&J vaccine over the next few weeks.
And now increased concern as well about that with issues in production and then issues also after distribution. We now have the press conference. It is beginning. We do hear it in our ears. We're going to go to that press conference live. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the FDA already in progress. You're listening to the Oakland County Megacast on Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM.
As a reminder, this audio call is being recorded and live streamed on the FDA's YouTube channel. When asking a question, please state your name and affiliation. You will be given the opportunity for 1 question. With that, I will now turn the call over to Acting FDA Commissioner Dr. Janet Woodcock.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. This morning, the FDA and CDC announced that out of an abundance of caution, we're recommending a pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine due to reports of 6 cases of a rare and severe type of blood clot following vaccine administration. We're recommending this pause while we work together to fully understand these events, and also so we can get information out to healthcare providers and vaccine recipients. Right now, I'd like to stress these events appear to be extremely rare. However, COVID-19 vaccine safety is a top priority for the federal government, and we take all reports of adverse events following vaccination very seriously. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Peter Marks, Director of FDA's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, for more information about these reports. Peter.
Thank you, Dr. Woodcock. Together, the CDC and the FDA are reviewing data involving 6 reports of a rare type of blood clot called cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, or CVST, in combination with low levels of platelets in the blood, called thrombocytopenia, in women ages 18 to 48 who presented with symptoms between 6 and 13 days after receiving the Johnson & Johnson or Janssen COVID-19 vaccine. Treatment of this specific type of blood clot is different from typical treatments for other types of blood clots, which usually involve an anticoagulant called heparin. With cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, heparin may be dangerous, and alternative treatments need to be given, preferably under the guidance of physicians experienced in the treatment of blood clots. Of the clots seen in the United States, 1 case was fatal and 1 patient is in critical condition. While we review the available data, out of an abundance of caution, the FDA and CDC are recommending a pause in the use of this vaccine in the United States. The FDA will revise the fact sheet for healthcare providers administering vaccine and the fact sheet for recipient and caregivers for the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine to include this adverse event information to ensure that healthcare providers are able to make appropriate benefit-risk determinations for their patients. I want to reiterate what Dr. Woodcock said. Right now, these events appear to be extremely rare. That said, COVID-19 vaccine safety is a top priority for federal government, and we take all reports of adverse events following vaccination very seriously. Healthcare providers who see people presenting to them with either a low blood platelet count or blood clots should establish whether or not the individual has recently been vaccinated in order to inform the appropriate diagnostic evaluation and management. Now I'd like to turn to Dr. Ann Schuchat, the CDC's Principal Deputy Director, to speak to further explain our decision and next steps. Ann?
Thanks so much, Dr. Marks. I know that the information we're providing today is going to be very concerning to Americans who have already received the Johnson & Johnson or Janssen vaccine. And I want to let you know what we're doing to learn more and to protect people in the meantime, and what you can do to be on the alert. As Dr. Marks mentioned, there have been 6 reports of a severe stroke-like illness linked to low platelet counts. And more than 6 million doses of the J&J vaccine have been administered so far. While these events are very rare, we're recommending a pause in the use of the J&J COVID-19 vaccine in order to prepare the healthcare system to recognize and treat patients appropriately and to report severe events they may be seeing in people who've received the J&J vaccine. This pause will also allow the CDC's expert committee to review the situation. The safety of vaccines and the safety of the American people is of the utmost importance to us. The ACIP, or our Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, is the CDC's independent scientific expert committee on immunization matters. We are scheduling for them to convene tomorrow to review the data we have on these initial cases. This will allow careful deliberation about what we know so far about these events and consider next steps given the current context of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States and our broader immunization efforts. As a reminder, ACIP meetings are open to public viewing. Today, we're also alerting state health officials and other leaders in the states and cities, pharmacies, and other healthcare providers who are administering the vaccine to make sure that they know about the pause, and so clinicians know how to evaluate and report severe events after vaccination. Lastly, I know there are people who have gotten the vaccine who are probably very concerned. For people who got the vaccine more than a month ago, the risk to them is very low at this time. For people who recently got the vaccine within the last couple weeks, they should be aware to look for any symptoms. If you've received the vaccine and developed severe headache, abdominal pain, leg pain, or shortness of breath, you should contact your healthcare provider and seek medical treatment. Now, these symptoms are different from the mild flu-like symptoms, fever, and so forth that many people experience in the couple days after receipt of the vaccine. Importantly, there are 3 vaccines available, and we are not seeing these clotting events with low platelet counts with the other 2 vaccines. People who have vaccine appointments with the other 2 vaccines should continue with their appointment. Our partners will be working to reschedule people who have the J&J vaccine appointment in the days ahead. This may be a bit bumpy. We want to make sure that we're getting the word out to the public and to our providers, but we do want to make sure that people who are scheduled to have vaccination will be able to get that when vaccine's available. We're committed to following the science and ensuring transparency and to providing regular updates. We're going to tell you what we know when we know it and what you can do to protect yourself. And our intention is to update you in the days ahead. I know this has been a long and difficult pandemic and a very long year and a half, and that people are tired of the steps that they need to take and are keen to be able to be vaccinated. The steps we're taking today are meant to make sure that the healthcare system is ready to diagnose, treat, and report, and that you, the American public, has the information you need to stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schuchat. At this time, we will begin the question and answer portion of the briefing. When asking a question, please state your name and affiliation. Operator will take the first question.
Thank you. And once again, that is *1 if you would like to ask a question. Our first question comes from Kieran Stacy. You may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Thanks very much. This is Kieran Stacy from the Financial Times. This obviously looks like the same thing that was happening with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the contacts that you've had with regulators in Europe about that, and also whether there's any evidence of similar events happening with Moderna and Pfizer at all.
Certainly. This is Janet Woodcock. We are in constant contact with the regulators worldwide and looking at adverse events experienced in different regions. I'll turn this over to Dr. Marks to answer in detail.
Thanks very much. So you asked about whether there were similar cases with the Moderna or Pfizer vaccines, and there have been over 180 million doses of these vaccines administered, and at this time we've not found any reports of cerebral vein sinus thrombosis combined with thrombocytopenia.
Operator will take the next question.
Thank you. That comes from Michael Ehrman. You may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, this is Mike Ehrman from Reuters. I'm wondering, just quickly, how long the pause is expected to be? What's the minimum time? And also whether you're considering limiting vaccination for J&J to certain groups like people over 50 or all men and women over 50?
Well, the time frame will depend, obviously, on what we learn in the next few days. However, we expect it to be a matter of days for this pause. And I will maybe turn it over to Dr. Shuckett to answer further.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Woodcock. We are committed to an expeditious review of the available information and to an aggressive outreach to clinicians so that they know how to diagnose, treat, and report. One of the things that the ACIP deliberation will do is review the data on the cases and the context of risks, benefits, and possible subsets of the population that may be in a different category. So I think our intent is in the days ahead to provide an update regularly, and that the pause provides us time for deliberation and assuring appropriate diagnosis and treatment.
Operator, we'll take the next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Elizabeth Weiss. You may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, USA Today. I had a question, and maybe this is for Dr. Marks. Do you have any sense of what the mechanism behind this might be? What could potentially be causing this?
Yeah, well, we have hypotheses. This is Janet Woodcock. Dr. Marks, maybe you want to enlarge upon that.
Yeah, so thanks very much. We don't have a definitive cause, but the probable cause that we believe may be involved here that we can speculate is a similar mechanism that may be going on with the other adenoviral vectored vaccine. That is that this is an immune response that occurs very, very rarely after some people receive the vaccine, and that immune response leads to activation of the platelets and these extremely rare blood clots.
Yes, so to be specific, this is Janet Woodcock. The person being vaccinated makes an immune response potentially that actually involves their own platelets or other parts of the coagulation system and can cause this problem. And that's the sort of leading theory or hypothesis about what's going on here.
Operator, we'll take the next question.
Thank you. And that comes from Matt Perrine. You may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, thanks, with the Associated Press. Thanks for taking questions. Can you talk a little bit more about just how the FDA determined that these 6 events out of, almost 7 million injections constitute a signal? I mean, what would have been the background rate for a type of event like this, if there is another explanation possible?
Certainly. This is Janet Woodcock. This was a extensive work between the CDC and the FDA on this set of events and analysis to see, exactly what you're asking about. So, Dr. Marks, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks very much. So, the issue of cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, the background rate of that is probably somewhere between 2 and 14 per million people. But that's in the setting of a normal platelet count. The combination here, the real thing that is so notable here is not just the cerebral venous sinus thrombosis or the thrombocytopenia. Those two things can occur. It's their occurrence together that makes a pattern, and that pattern is very, very similar to what was seen in Europe with another vaccine. So I think we have to take the time to make sure we understand this complication and we address it properly.
Thank you.
Operator, we'll take the next question.
Ann Flaherty, you may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, this is Ann Flaherty with ABC News. So what would you say to people who are concerned and frustrated that they think this might be an overreaction, considering it's 6 people out of 7 million?
I would ask Dr. Suja to respond to that. Thanks.
Sure. You know, we are committed to safety and transparency and to expeditiously learning as much as we can so that further steps can be taken. When we saw this pattern and were aware that treatment needed to be individualized for this condition, it was of the utmost important for us to get the word out. That said, the pandemic is quite severe and cases are increasing in a lot of places, and vaccination is critical. So we want to make sure that we make some recommendations quickly.
Thank you. Operator, we'll take the next question.
Thank you. Jacqueline Howard, you may go ahead. Please state your outlet.
Thanks for taking my question. I'm with CNN, and I would like to know more about the decision-making process for the pause. It seems like just yesterday we were told that this was something that was being looked into, and then this morning the decision was made. We also understand that some states may be upset that they were not given a heads up. So can someone explain how did this decision happen quickly, and why was the decision made, and were states involved or given awareness or heads up that the pause would happen? Thank you.
Sure, Dr. Marks. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I can just start and then let Dr. Marks expand. I wish that we had more time to get everyone prepared and that this could go as even more smoothly. We, as we learned about the issue with appropriate treatment, and it was clear to us that we needed to alert the public. We included the pause in addition to the alert so that there was time for the healthcare community to learn what they needed to learn about how to diagnose, treat, and report. But the decision was based on the events that might occur between when we made that realization and when we got the word out. So it was a question of wanting to make sure we could be open with our concerns and prepare the healthcare community to diagnose, treat, and report while the more detailed deliberation occurs tomorrow. I don't know if you have anything to add, Dr. Marks.
No, I would just echo that the issue here with these types of blood clots is that if one administers the standard treatments that we as doctors have learned to give for blood clots, one can actually cause tremendous harm, or the outcome can be fatal. So one needs to make sure that providers are aware that if they see people who have low blood platelets, or if they see people who have blood clots, they need to inquire about a history of recent vaccination and then act accordingly in the diagnosis and management of those individuals. This was taken rapidly in order to honor our commitment to the American public to ensure that any safety signal that came up during this vaccine rollout was fully addressed in a transparent manner.
Operator, we'll take the next question.
Thank you. Caroline Chen, you may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, I'm Caroline Chen at ProPublica. I was wondering if the FDA has any sense of any subpopulations or medical histories that may predispose a person to this rare side effect, or even if you have a hypothesis on that at this point.
This is Janet Woodcock. I believe there are too few cases for us to make that determination for this particular vaccine. We may be hearing about more cases. We will look further into these. We'll have deliberations, as was just described, tomorrow about the details, but we aren't prepared at this time to single out any particular subgroup.
Operator, we'll take the next question.
Thank you. Jackie Lee, you may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much for having this call. I'm with Bloomberg Law. I was hoping that someone could address kind of anything that you would suggest going forward regarding messaging for this. I would anticipate that, there could be some fears about this stoking some more vaccine hesitancy. And so, what would you recommend to help providers to avoid that situation?
Well, this is Janet Woodcock again. Number one, we've had several questions related to this. I think we need to reiterate, we are committed to vaccination. We feel that is a really important tool to get this pandemic under control. We're also committed to patient safety, and our message is that in doing this, we feel we're taking the route that will provide the most safety for the patient by enabling healthcare professionals to recognize, to properly treat, and properly report any of the events that might happen. But the message to the patients, I think, would be, to those who haven't been vaccinated, would continue to be to get vaccines that are available to them, because the risks from the pandemic are significant, and that the government is really looking into very carefully any safety problems so that they could be managed properly with this particular vaccine and all vaccines.
Maybe I could expand, this is Dr. Schuchat, just to say, agree with Dr. Woodcock's assessment, and just to remind clinicians and the public that 121 million people have been vaccinated with at least one dose of one of the three vaccines, and the vast majority of the doses were of the other two products, the Pfizer and Moderna products. With our intensive safety monitoring, we have not detected this type of syndrome with the low platelets among the other vaccines, and we have real-world evidence now of the vaccine's effectiveness in the U.S. So we're taking this pause and precautions around the J&J product in the context of a large, robust, and highly safe and effective vaccination effort.
Thank you. Operator, we'll take the next question. Thank you. Eben Braun, you may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, good morning. This is Eben Brown from Fox News. I'm curious about the choice of words in your announcements. You are recommending a pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but you are not ordering a stoppage. Is there a difference between the two? What would that difference be? And what would happen, or what should happen, or what are your words to a state or a county or a nonprofit outfit that does not heed your recommendation? Thank you.
Dr. Marks, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. This is a recommendation, and it's not a mandate. It's out of an abundance of caution, we're recommending that the vaccine be paused in terms of its administration. However, if an individual healthcare provider has a conversation with an individual patient and they determine that the benefit risk for that individual patient is appropriate, we're not going to stop that provider from administering the vaccine, because it could be, right, in many cases, that benefit risk will be beneficial overall to that individual in the large majority of cases. So, again, we're recommending a pause out of an abundance of caution, but on an individual basis, a provider and patient can make a determination whether or not to receive the vaccine.
Operator, we'll take the next question. Thank you. Sarah Overman, you may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, thank you. This is Sarah Overmal from Politico. Going back to Caroline's question on subgroups, I know that there's a few cases now, but is there any sort of risk from linked to birth control, because all of the women are of childbearing age? And then also, obviously, there are 6 confirmed cases now, but probably more are going to come out as people recognize this. So is there a number? How many probable cases do you guys have on your horizon right now?
Dr. Marks?
This is Jay. I'm happy to take this one. Yeah. Thanks very much. At this time, it's not clear that there's any association with the oral contraceptive pill birth control in the individuals who had these blood clots. Additionally, I think it's too early to make any speculation on how many cases will come out. I do agree with you that it's possible we will learn of more cases, and that's part of the reason why we're taking the pause to try to ascertain that. But I cannot speculate on how many more we'll learn of. Hopefully, it's just going to be a few.
Thank you.
Operator will take the next question.
Thank you. Leanne Winnick, you may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, I'm from CBS News, and I actually have 2 questions. As you mentioned that some people may have a conversation with their healthcare provider and decide that this is appropriate for them, but most people are going to mass vaccination sites and don't have that relationship. Are there certain risk factors that an individual would know from their medical history? And secondly, could you estimate the number of J&J that were meant to be given out in the days ahead and how that might affect the president's 200 million dose goal since his inauguration? Thanks.
Anyone would like to respond to this question?
Let me start with the second question first. I think the vaccine supply has become more abundant over time, and I think that this temporary pause is hopefully not going to have a large adverse effect on making those goals in a timely manner, if any at all. In terms of risk factors, I think those are, at this point, they are specific enough that to an individual that's going to have to be a determination that an individual has with their healthcare provider. And I'll turn that over to Dr. Schuchat, since this is she may have more to say about that.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Marks. We're working right now from a small number from the 6 events that have been reported here in the U.S. And so while we're seeing them in women under 50, I think we are going to need to take some time and have our Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices take additional time to review. As my understanding is that there weren't predisposing conditions for these events in at least some of those individuals. And then the issue of supply, just to say that currently the J&J product had been providing the minority, the great minority of doses. Every dose is precious, and we're keen to get as many doses as possible administered as rapidly as possible and as equitably as possible. But it's too early for us to know the impact on the supply longer term.
I couldn't hear what you said, Dr. Schuchat. You said there were or were not pre-existing conditions in these 6 cases.
What I tried to say is there were not in all of them. So not to say that there may have been in some, but I think, I think my main point is that review of 6 is difficult to make generalizations from. We're going to have our expert committee take a careful look, and we're, of course, trying to assure that providers will report suspect episodes so that they can be further investigated, because the numbers are quite small enough that it's hard to generalize, but large enough that we wanted to take the action with the pause.
Operator will take our next question.
Thank you. Helen Braswell, you may go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, yes, it's Helen Braswell from STAT. Thank you for taking my question. I think this is a question for Dr. Marks. Your remarks earlier suggest you think this is a class effect. are you looking back through data of the various experimental adenovirus vectored vaccines that have been produced over the years, the one GSK was making with NIAID, or the J&J Ebola vaccine for that matter, to see if there's data there that can help you with this problem?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. We're going to look at the totality of the evidence available to us that informs this. So, yes.
But do you think it is a class effect?
Well, I hesitate to call it a class effect, but I think it's plainly obvious to us already that what we're seeing with the Janssen vaccines looks very similar to what was being seen with the AstraZeneca vaccine. One is the AstraZeneca is a chimpanzee adenoviral vectored vaccine. The Janssen is a human adenoviral vectored vaccine. So I think I can't make some broad statement yet, but obviously they are from the same general class of viral vectors.
J&J is doing a 2-dose trial. Have you asked them to pause that?
I think you can look at statements that will come out of J&J today about their voluntary actions in response to this request for a pause.
Thank you. Operator, we will take our last question.
Thank you. Dr. John LaPook, you may go ahead. Please state your outlet.
Hi, Dr. John LaPook, CBS News. I'm wondering if you could help put this in perspective a little bit more. The CVST you said was about 2 to 14 per million. I assume that's per year. Inpatients with normal platelets. And these 6 people, in order to annualize them, that's over what, about the 6 weeks since authorization?
That's probably correct.
Right.
So, do we know what the rate is in people with low platelets? Because now it's the 2 to 14. It sounds like it's like 1 in a million. If it's 6 or 7 million, that's very, very. It's about what the background rate would be in people with normal platelets. But we're saying what makes this unusual is that they have the combination of the low platelets and the clotting. So, do we know what the background rate is in people who have the CVST and low platelets?
This is Peter Marks. We don't. But what we do know is that this type of a combination of low platelets and blood clots has been very rarely seen in the past in other situations as an autoimmune phenomena. But it's very, very rare, such that I don't have an annualized rate that I can provide you.
Because I can imagine as a clinician, headache, we're going to now see a lot of people with headache. The management specifics, I guess you didn't want to really go into, but I guess it's not anticoagulation standard. It's maybe some kind of thrombectomy or something. But I can imagine in the next couple of days, which is probably why you're rushing to get this assessed quickly, there's going to be a lot of phone calls to doctors like me.
So maybe I can pass it over to Dr. Schuckert in a moment, but I think some of the key information here is that these have usually occurred at least about a week after vaccination and not longer than 3 weeks after vaccination, with a median of about 9 days after vaccination. We know that for these vaccines, for the first several days after vaccination, there are flu-like symptoms, which can include headache. So I think for the internists out there and the primary care providers who are caring for patients, if they're seeing flu-like symptoms and headache for the first few days after vaccination, that is likely just what has been seen in the common adverse events that are not serious with these vaccines. It would be more important that if somebody presented to an emergency room with a very severe headache or with blood clots, that a history of prior vaccination be elicited and then appropriate management be instituted. So I think this is the message that we need to get out to healthcare providers, that if someone ends up with a very severe headache or any type of shortness of breath, pain in their legs, pain in their abdomen that's severe, that they would want to seek medical attention. And if there are low platelets at that time, one needs to consider this entity.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, this concludes today's media briefing. A replay will be available on the FDA's YouTube page.
That, of course, from the FDA, a joint press briefing, a media call with them and the FDA. You're listening to the Oakland County Megacast on 89.3 Lakes FM, Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access, and 88.1 The Biff. Ronnie.
We're going to take a quick break here on the show, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Senator Gary Peters. This is the Megacast.
Over a decade ago, the journey to a COVID vaccine began. Building upon research on other coronaviruses, scientists continued with months of research and development, 3 phases of clinical trials with tens of thousands of diverse volunteers, then peer review and authorization to deliver a safe and effective vaccine that will protect all of us. Discover the facts for yourself at michigan.gov/COVID vaccine.
Thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday to be with us here on the Megacast. Of course, we were just listening to the joint media call between the FDA and the CDC to discuss the breaking news today that they are calling for a pause in the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. And you have to wonder, what is that going to mean for people here in the state of Michigan, because we're in the middle of a surge right now. And with that, let's bring in Senator Gary Peters. We have so many things to talk to you about today, but since we're just coming out of the media briefing, your thoughts on the announcement of the pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
Well, it's certainly something that they need to do. There has been some cases of blood clotting, and so certainly you've got to err on the side of caution, so it's the right thing to do. Hopefully it can be investigated quickly, and hopefully they can find out what the answer is as to whether or not we can continue to use the Johnson & Johnson. But in the meantime, it's important to stress that we have 2 great vaccines, one from Moderna, one from Pfizer, that's actually made right here in the state of Michigan. Those are safe, they're effective, and folks need to get out and get those vaccines as quickly as possible.
Senator, I expect you're going to be getting a lot of calls from residents here in the state of Michigan with concerns over this development. How do you think this is going to impact the overall effort here in the state of Michigan to try to get as many people vaccinated, because our numbers are surging right now?
The numbers are surging, and it certainly is a concern. I had a call yesterday with CEOs from all the leading hospitals all across the state. They are very concerned. They're seeing folks come into their hospital at levels that they haven't seen in a long time. In fact, in some ways higher than what we've seen earlier. So it's stressing their staff that is already tired after repeated surges. So it's a real challenge for them. What they're telling me is that they are seeing the age come down to their average patient. In fact, I think depending on the hospital, it was somewhere around 56 or 57 years old. That's considerably less than what they saw in previous surges, which were in the high 60s. And I asked them specifically, is that because we're seeing higher vaccination rates with folks who are older than that? And they said most definitely, because others have been vaccinated. You are now seeing the virus hit those folks who were not vaccinated. That age is coming down, but they're concerned deeply about that, which makes it incumbent on us to do what we know actually works to slow down the spread of this virus. And that means wear a mask, social distancing, make sure you're not congregating in groups. We need to do that immediately while the vaccine continues, both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine continue to be put into people's arms.
So if I can kind of ask you just your thoughts, we had the CDC, which basically is saying they're not going to play whack-a-mole with the vaccines and trying to surge vaccines in some of these hot spots, which the governor has requested. Your thoughts on that process, and also, not shutting down things more here in the state of Michigan?
Well, I think it's it's important to make sure the vaccines are available to those places that are actually using it. I had this issue and I fought aggressively at the beginning of this pandemic when we know that the Detroit area was a hot spot right from the beginning. I serve now as chair. I was ranking member at the time of the Homeland Security Committee, which oversees FEMA, responsible for the distribution at that time of the personal protection equipment. And they had the similar kind of process. They were putting it out equitably, equally across the country, which I understand. But at that time, we had a shortage of personal protection equipment, and yet we had surges in areas like Detroit area that were critically short. And we worked aggressively to try to get some of that personal protection equipment into the hotspots. It's basically a triage situation. Make sure supplies are available to those in the greatest need, and then you backfill other places. I think there's some way they can do that. And I've actually stressed this to the White House that I know there are a number of states in terms of the vaccine where their distribution has not been as aggressive as we have here in Michigan, and they're sitting on larger supplies of the vaccine. So that doesn't mean that we play whack-a-mole. It means that those areas where the vaccine is most needed, and if there are more limited supplies, make sure they have the supplies necessary to get it into the arms of their population. And certainly those states that may be sitting on larger supplies, they can wait a week or two to get additional, because it's not going to put them in any jeopardy. We don't want to put another state in jeopardy while we're taking care of Michigan, but I think there's a way to manage that in a way to make sure that those areas where they're seeing a surge, that the vaccine gets out. But I also want to reiterate, and I think probably I didn't hear the CDC briefing that you just had, if it just dealt with Johnson & Johnson, but the CDC has also put out a notice to realize vaccines do take a few weeks to work. Once you get it in your arm, it's still a 2+ week process before it really starts having an impact. And that means it's incumbent on each and every one of us individually. The way to stop the disease from spreading now is to wear a mask. It's to stay socially distanced. It's to wash your hands. It's to stay away from groups that may spread it. So we can take action now, and we must take action now while we continue to make sure the vaccine gets into as many arms as possible, as quickly as possible.
Well, we know a lot more about this virus than we did a year ago, but back in the beginning, a lot of the shutdowns were due to try and flatten the curve, to try to keep our healthcare systems from becoming overwhelmed. But right now, they are overwhelmed. So why not be shutting things down? I think there's just a mixed message in there to the public right now.
Well, that's ultimately going to be the governor's decision based on the advice that she's getting from epidemiologists here at the state. But I think she has already announced that there's a pause on reopening businesses. She's asked for a 2-week pause from school districts and others. So she has been certainly putting that information that we should take a pause on these kinds of reopenings.
So if I can ask you, things are a lot different than a year ago, and as you were mentioning, we were in such short supply of PPE back in the beginning, and a lot of it was because we weren't manufacturing so many of these items here in the United States. I know you've been an advocate to try to bring manufacturing back to the United States and to the state of Michigan. Do you want to talk more about that?
Well, I have been working on that. We're going to continue to work on that to make sure that these critical supplies are made in the United States and in Michigan. We have a unique opportunity to do that because of our manufacturing expertise. But you mentioned the report. Actually, as the ranking member of Homeland Security, I had my committee do a report in 2019, before the pandemic, looking at critical drug shortages that we see at that time, even in this country, and shortages of medical equipment. And in that report, it was pretty clear that our supply chain is overly dependent on foreign sources. And when it comes to critical precursors for drugs that we use for every drug we use, the precursors are predominantly made in China. And the report conclusion that came out, that I put out, said that when there is a pandemic in this country, we're going to find ourselves in a very precarious situation. Little did I know at that time, just a few short months after that report came out, we found ourselves in a pandemic, and we found ourselves in the precarious situation that we had identified. And in that report, realized that we had to bring supplies back. We have to strengthen our supply chain. Now it's incumbent on us to do that. And clearly no one's going to disagree with the conclusion that I had in that report now that we have experienced that. So we need to incentivize production here in this country, bring it back. I've got legislation to do that we're going to be pushing forward to strengthen those supply chains. But we know that supply chains, and this occurs not just in critical supplies like medicine, we're seeing that firsthand with the silicon chips that are used in electronics applications. It's having an impact on our auto industry because so many of those chips, and we're overly dependent once again on foreign manufacturers for chips. And as a result of those shortages, we've got auto plants shutting down and people being laid off because of it. We have to make more resilience in these supply chains, bring this more onshore. There has to be a focus on that. I'm also working on a National Institute of Manufacturing to make sure that we put a focus on making things in this country. If you look at other countries around the world, they get it. They understand how important manufacturing is to their economies. I think of two countries in particular that do a good job at this, which is Germany and South Korea. We need to pick up from that best practice and understand as a country, we need to also make sure we're doing everything we can to encourage, develop, and expand and strengthen manufacturing in America.
We're talking with Senator Gary Peters with us here on the Megacast. If I can go ahead and jump around a little bit, President Joe Biden has been out pushing his $2 trillion American Jobs Plan, which started talk around infrastructure. Your thoughts?
There's no question that we have to make substantial investments into infrastructure. Once again, you can't be a great country if you don't have world-class infrastructure. That means certainly the traditional infrastructure that we think of, which is roads and bridges, but it's also all types of infrastructure, from underground infrastructure when it comes to sewer and water systems. Certainly we know the importance of that from what happened in Flint. We also have to look at the infrastructure in terms of the internet to make sure that everybody has access to high-speed internet. It's a critical piece of infrastructure, and we saw the glaring gaps in that through this pandemic, where children who were not being in school and had to be instructed online, we found at the beginning of this pandemic, 1/3 of our students did not have the connectivity necessary to do their schoolwork via online. Some of the powerful tools to deal with the delivery of healthcare, particularly in a pandemic, which is telemedicine, where you can have access to medical services in the comfort of your home, but you need to have high-speed internet. Most folks are not able to take advantage of that, particularly the elderly who would most benefit from it. We have to look at high-speed internet the way in the previous century, we looked at electricity. We said that everybody in this country has access to electricity, no matter where you live. The same thing with high-speed internet, big part of the infrastructure package. And when you're talking about electricity, we know that our electrical grid also needs to be updated and major investments need to be made. And anybody who has any questions about that just needs to look at what happened in Texas earlier this year, that we need to make those kinds of infrastructure investments. These are investments that need to be made now, and they will pay dividends to us for decades to come. And it's a necessary thing that has to be done quickly.
Yeah, I thought a lot about the electrical grid because we're seeing such a push right now for electric vehicles. And I know part of this plan does call for more charging stations throughout the country. But the grid can be, what year was that, 2006, 7?
Yes.
When we had the big blackout. And we see how sensitive the grid can be. And if we get more and more electrical vehicles on the roadways, we need it to be upgraded.
No question about it. You need to have, once again, that resiliency. Same thing as we talked about in the supply chain. You need to be resilient and thinking about it broadly. I passed legislation, for example, last year dealing with actually space weather events that can have an impact on the grid. You know, people don't usually think about that when you're thinking about resiliency, but it's that kind of comprehensive approach that we need. But part of that means making the investments to make sure that you have the security of that supply. And when it comes to electric vehicles, we know that our domestic manufacturers, GM, Ford, Chrysler, are all leaning very heavily into electrifying their fleet. You're seeing more of those vehicles come out. Another area that I'm working on, which deals with automation and the ability for for cars to be able to drive themselves. Self-driving cars is the future of mobility, and our automakers are leaning in aggressively. But even before you get to that point, a lot of the technology that goes into that into self-driving will make our cars a whole lot safer than they are right now. They will eliminate a lot of the human error. In fact, if you look at accidents, 90+% of accidents are human error. You can eliminate a great deal of that. And when you think about the fact that nearly 40,000 people die in our country every year with auto accidents, this will save literally tens of thousands of lives. And if you ask the engineers of General Motors and Ford and Chrysler and other automakers, they will tell you these new safety systems, the ideal power plant is electric. And so they look at electrification as the future, not just as a result from a climate issue, but also as a safety issue that will literally save tens of thousands of people's lives each and every year on the highways.
So I'm wondering, where is the workforce going to come from? Because this is going to create a lot of jobs, but so many manufacturing plants right now are struggling to get skilled tradespeople to come work for them.
And that's actually part of the infrastructure package proposed by President Biden as well, is to expand apprenticeship programs, expand career training, skills training. We underinvest in this country in that kind of training, which is absolutely critical for our future. And if you look at what we spend on four-year college programs at the federal level, it's considerably more, by many multiples, of what we spend in skills training for folks, even though a majority of our population in our country are going to be in skilled jobs as opposed to going to college. And we have to continue to make those investments. I passed legislation last year, for example, to expand the ability for veterans coming off of active duty to be able to use their GI Bill in apprenticeship programs, not just four-year programs, two-year programs, but go into apprenticeship programs, have a wide range of opportunities to go into those skilled jobs, which many veterans want to do and are exceptionally qualified right out of the box to be able to go into those professions and contribute to the country while providing a very good living for their families. So those are the kinds of investments that also need to be made as we look to the future and make sure that we're aligning the skills that are available for folks with the jobs that are available.
Senator Gary Peters with us here on the Megacast. We know that you have another meeting, so we want to say thank you for squeezing us into your schedule. We appreciate your time and we appreciate your leadership throughout this pandemic.
Well, great to be with you. Thanks for having me on, and I'll look forward to being on again if you have me in the near future.
Anytime. You're always welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast. I will say, if I'm a college or a high school student right now, I would be looking at going into some of these skilled trade areas, because if this does get passed, they are going to need people so much. And you can pretty much write your ticket right now, take advantage of the programs that are available now, but also going to be coming available as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of great jobs out in the skilled trades. Actually, one of my cousins went into the trades as a mechanic and came out with a really solid job right out of his formal training and his schooling for it. And there's a lot of that out there, and you can, as you say, make your way in there, because these jobs are abundant. They need people with these skills, and they're looking for fresh people that can be in this industry for years to come working for these companies.
Healthcare industry, manufacturing jobs. There are so many jobs to be had, but it does take training as well. So take advantage of some of the programs that are out there. But of course, this is a $2 trillion package. He has to get Republican buy-in to try to get it passed. But I think we all can agree here, especially us here in Michigan, infrastructure needs to finally be addressed.
Yeah, that's going to be a major part of that, and having people in skilled trades that can build, that can repair, that can contribute to repairing that infrastructure is going to be critical as well. But that infrastructure's got to be there for the future of the state, beyond even just these skilled trades.
I will say one thing that is scary. I did a report a few years ago, an investigative report about the state of our bridges.
Yes.
And it really is scary. And I will say, for years afterwards, every time I drove over a bridge, I couldn't look at it the same. So it's good to see if they're actually going to make this happen. Always appreciate the senators' time, but we're going to take a quick break here on the MegaCast. When we come back, we're going to continue the important conversation surrounding the virus and everything that is happening, especially here locally in Michigan. Eric Wallace, the president for the Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital, will be joining us after this quick break.
Wearing a mask is more than protection. It's a bridge to better days. The path back to celebrations with family. Nights out on the town with friends. Game days with your favorite sports teams. And the thrill of live concerts. But until we can all get the COVID-19 vaccine and build community immunity, which will take time, we all need to continue to stay careful. Because Michigan's recovery is depending on you, and so are your family, friends, and neighbors. So even after you're vaccinated, wear a mask, avoid large gatherings, and social distance. One day in the near future, we will all be able to put this pandemic behind us. But until then, spread hope, not COVID. Learn more at michigan.gov/coronavirus. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
In times like these, we have to believe in each other.
And we believe that you'll do the right thing.
When it comes to stopping the spread of COVID.
Follow the 3 W's.
Wear a mask.
Wash your hands.
Watch your distance. And when it's your turn to get the vaccine, take your shot.
It all comes down to the golden rule.
Treat others the way you want to be treated.
We're so close, Michigan.
We can do this together.
Listening to 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. I'm Ronnie Dahl here in the studios alongside Mr. Tyler Keefe. You can always catch us Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. until noon, live here on the MegaCast. But then, of course, we do rebroadcast this show, or you can catch up with some of the previous interviews. Just go to civiccentertv.com because we have so many great conversations with so many people that are impacting all of the things that we are continuing to try to navigate as the COVID-19 crisis is now well into, 13 months? Yes. But yet we are here in the state of Michigan seeing a surge pretty similar to what we were seeing back at the beginning of this. To talk a little bit more, let's bring in Eric Wallace. He's the president for Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital. Always great to have you with us.
I appreciate you having me back. I wish we could find better things to talk about.
I know. Can we have you back like when this is over and have like balloons and cake?
Absolutely. Let's go for it.
So obviously, if we could kind of start off with the big news coming out of the FDA and the CDC this morning regarding the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. As someone who is on the front lines of the healthcare industry, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, what I would applaud the FDA and others for doing is really trying to take a pause and make sure that the vaccine is doing what it's supposed to do and not doing what it's not. A few weeks back, they actually did something very similar in Europe. And when they, did their investigation there, they saw that the incidence of people having blood clots with the vaccine was about the same as it was in the normal population. And that's why we saw that resume. I think we've seen, forgive me if I missed this a little bit, but I think 6 cases of blood clots here in the United States out of 6.8 million doses that have been given. So that's still an exceptionally low rate. But I think what the FDA is doing right now is, using an abundance of caution and just making sure that they do their due diligence and dive in and make sure that the vaccine isn't causing something what they weren't intending it to.
So we should remind people as well, it's pretty common for people to have side effects from vaccines, not just a COVID vaccine.
Absolutely. I think, almost every vaccine we have has some kind of side effect to it. Many people are used to the, tetanus shot and having a really sore arm after that one. Many of these things are really simply the body's response to the vaccine being introduced. And it's really what you want to happen is you want your immune system to respond. And the goal of these vaccines is to prep your body that if it does happen to see the COVID virus show up later on down the road, that the body's ready to defend itself against it. And so it's not uncommon to have some simple side effects to these things. Certainly people have allergies that we're working our way through. I can tell you within our own health system, we're seeing of all the vaccines, and we've given almost 250,000 vaccines from Henry Ford at this point, the complication rate is about 0.1%. So it's, again, extremely, extremely low and very comparable to what we're seeing with other vaccines that have been around for a very long time.
So with that, do you think it hurts the messaging to get people vaccinated right now?
Well, I think anytime that you see a splashy headline, and unfortunately, I think we live in a social media society where folks don't always read the rest of the story, that it's a worry because, folks are right now already on edge. It's already been a very politicized pandemic. And any headline that comes out that people don't take the time to investigate and really understand what's going on can have untoward effects toward our efforts to get everybody vaccinated.
So with that, because I do know people who don't want to get vaccinated. I know people that were lining up the very first day. Some people signed up for the trials. But what is the percentage? We need people to get vaccinated so that people such as yourself and the workers over at the hospital, you guys need a break.
Yeah. That would be wonderful. I think, most folks have been very consistent, whether it's Dr. Fauci or others. We've got to get somewhere in that 75-80% vaccinated rate for this to really reach that point of herd immunity. I've been very encouraged when you look at the numbers that are coming out of places like Ford Field, where they're vaccinating 6,000-7,000 people a day. When you see the vaccination rates across the state go up, where we're getting closer to 30 and 40% vaccinated within the state. I think we'll get there. I'm optimistic, but at the end of the day, we are squarely in the midst of, whether you want to call it wave 3 or wave 4. We are seeing numbers that we have not seen really since this time last year. Unfortunately, this wave has kind of surpassed what we saw last fall, and really, unfortunately, we've seen a much younger crowd this time in the hospitals. So the average age for this most recent wave in Henry Ford is in the low 50s. And so, the good news about that is what we're seeing is we're not seeing it in our older population that is vaccinated at a much higher rate. So again, I would say it shows the vaccine works. And really it is a race right now to try to get people vaccinated as quickly as we can so that we don't see that the case rates continue to climb.
So what capacity limits are you at right now at Henry Ford West Bloomfield?
Yeah, we're full, is the short answer. We have been utilizing some of our surge spaces that we utilized last spring. We have at this point been able to maintain all of our normal book of business in addition to that, but our emergency department is running very full at this point. We are over or at or above 100% capacity at the moment. But I would say, again, just like everybody else, we've learned how to manage through this. And so some of the triggers and some of the resources that we've tried to use over the last year, we've been able to put those back into place a little bit. And so at the moment we're managing, it's safe. We're able to get everybody the care that they need. But I'd really like to see these numbers not go up any higher.
Because on the backside of this, we know what happened last year. There were so many people that delayed going to the hospital to get help when they needed it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's my biggest fear is that as we talk about the capacity and as we talk about this wave and how it's getting closer and closer to that wave that we had last year, I am worried that people are going to say, you know what, I don't feel like I want to go in and get my routine cancer screenings done. I'm not going to keep my routine appointments with my primary care doc. I would say I would qualify. We've not seen that yet. But I think we want to continue to stress to folks that we're here, we're open, and we're doing everything in our power to be able to maintain that routine care so that people can get those things. We did see, and we have seen, people that have come in with much later stage cancers because they weren't screened in the appropriate time frame last year. And so we don't want people to have those effects. I remind everyone last year that we saw a much higher incidence of people passing away from cardiac events and strokes at home and we certainly don't want to see that repeated this time either. So I just will continue to stress, if you need care, talk to your primary care doctor, come into our emergency departments. We're going to make sure that we take care of you safely.
And so with that, I know that it's a different story this year in that you've been able to now secure some of the supplies such as PPE, but what about staffing levels? That's not so easy to fix.
Yeah, and actually that's probably the biggest challenge that we have at the moment, simply because we haven't stopped doing all those elective things. Last year, really what we were able to do is supplement our regular staffing with team members that we pulled out of our ORs, that we pulled out of our physicians' offices that we closed, and some of our clinics that we closed. And again, we're trying really hard not to do that this time. I would say, I'll speak specifically for our hospital here in West Bloomfield. We spent a lot of time after that first wave trying to make sure that we were aggressive in our hiring practices and making sure that we had enough team members. We didn't have kind of gaps in our staffing going into this. And so that's really helped us at this point. But, you know, we had some conversation this week. Last year, we had partners from the Cleveland Clinic, WellSpan, other health systems around the country that actually sent their nurses to us. And they're not able to do that this time because they're dealing with their own surges. And so, yeah, it's probably a bigger worry this time around to make sure that we have enough, bedside nurses, physicians, caregivers to make sure that we can manage the patients that are coming through our door.
Eric Wallace with us here on the Megacast. He's the president for Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital. A little bit confusing for some of the people regarding visitation. Can people come to the hospital, or it's pretty much once you go in, it's a lockdown situation?
No, each of our hospitals is in a slightly different place right now, and it kind of depends on the volume that we're seeing of COVID patients and frankly the physical layout of some of our facilities. We're blessed here at Henry Ford West Bloomfield that all of our patient rooms are private rooms. We know that our patients do better when they have loved ones with them. And so at this point in time, we have still maintained that all of our patients can have one visitor with them for the duration of their time as an inpatient. The only exception to that is our patients that are COVID positive. We are restricting visitation for those patients, out of safety for both the patient and for those family members. So we are still restricting visitation for those COVID positive patients. But that's really been the same throughout the last year. So that's not a new restriction.
How does it work for people that are fully vaccinated?
Really no difference for us at this point. We're not asking people when they come in if they are vaccinated or not. We continue to screen everyone who comes into the building for symptoms and ask them if they've had exposures to COVID positive patients. And so we've maintained that screening process. And if people are symptomatic, if they're experiencing not feeling well, just like any other time, we're going to ask them not to come visit, take care of themselves first, and then we'd love to see them come back when they're feeling better.
So with that too, if we can, a lot of the discussion has been about trying to convince people that the vaccine is safe, to get them vaccinated, but we know that there are reports a lot of healthcare workers have not wanted to get vaccinated, yet they're on the front lines and they see the impact of this virus so much more than the rest of us. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, when you look at most healthcare systems around the state, and ours included, we're somewhere between 60 and 70% vaccinated. What I would say to you is it's really not the folks who work on the front lines that have been hesitant so much. Our physicians are currently over 92% vaccinated. The nursing staff is quite a high vaccination rate as well. Where we're seeing it is in some of our populations that work a little further away from the bedside. And frankly, we're like everyone else. We have some team members that are in vulnerable populations that historically have had some hesitancy around vaccinations. We're doing a lot of unique programs right now to make it easy for them to get vaccinated. Just in the last couple of weeks, we had a special clinic where we were able to get 17 of our environmental services folks that had been hesitant to come in and get vaccinated now because they've had a chance to kind of see, that the vaccines are safe, and we spend a lot of time educating them as well. So I think we're making progress on it. I think it's one of those things that anytime there's something new, let alone something as again, politicized as the vaccines have been, we see a little bit of hesitancy, but we're ramping it up, and our goal is that we're going to be at 80% here very shortly.
So with that, how is your supply of the vaccine? We know it's been tight in the beginning, but it seems to be getting better.
Yeah, I think the good news is we're at a point now where, we've been very partnered with, the Oakland County Health Department. So we've been taking, some vaccine and helping them out. We obviously have the mass vac site down at Ford Field that we've been partnered with FEMA on. And so we're actually at a point now where we have some folks who are saying, hey, we've got some extra vaccine. Can Henry Ford take it? And can you guys use it? And so we've been able to do that. We have mass vaccination sites in Troy on Maple Road, down at one Ford Place, and on Ford Road. And so we're routinely vaccinating 3,000 to 4,000 people a day just from the Henry Ford site. And again, 6,000 to 7,000 people a day at the Ford Field site. And so I would say that the supply of Pfizer and Moderna has been improving steadily. The J&J vaccine had its little issue with their plant, which cut back the supply there anyway. But I think we're seeing enough that we're projecting, I think, by the end of May that we'll have really more vaccine than there is demand. So that's a great sign.
Yeah, it seems like, especially when we take a step back, this has all happened within a year. Absolutely. Science is amazing.
Yeah. Well, really, I think one of the big myths that's been out there about these vaccines is that they were developed so quickly. The amazing thing about specifically the mRNA technology is it's been used for over 2 decades in our treatment of cancer patients. The vaccines actually started to be developed back in 2008, 2009 with the flu kind of epidemics that took place in that space. And really, so the technology's been around for quite a while. This was just the first time to actually roll it out in a vaccine. The trials were all done exactly the same way that any other vaccine trial would be done. The difference really in the speed of this was that the federal government paid the manufacturers to make the product before it was approved. And so when it was approved, it was sitting there on the shelf and ready to roll, as opposed to having multiple months delay at that point. So it's really, it's some really great technology. I think you're going to see mRNA really be the way that vaccines are developed in the foreseeable future now because of the efficacy that we've seen with them. And so I think it's one of those myths that's out there that, man, gosh, they couldn't have done this the way they do everything else, but really they did.
So when we're talking about the differences in the 3 different vaccines, we know Pfizer is trying to get approval to be able to administer it to 12 to 15-year-olds. How important is it to try to reach the younger kids as well to help us get to that herd immunity?
Yeah, I think it's critical. When you look at the spikes now that we're seeing in this wave, we're seeing a lot more younger folks being infected. The new variant, specifically the UK variant, is much more transmissible, and I think that's why we're seeing COVID pop up more in kids now. I live here in the West Bloomfield School District. My kids are in the high school. My 17-year-old just got vaccinated down at Ford Field. My 15-year-old is anxiously waiting for the emergency use of the Pfizer vaccine so she can be vaccinated and be safe. I think it's going to be crucial to actually getting to that herd immunity piece because unlike the original wave of this where kids really weren't transmitting it, now they really are. And I think that's something that we got to get ahead of.
So you're already at 100% capacity. How concerned are you with spring break? Because I go on social media, everyone is in Florida. I mean, people are getting stuck in Florida because they have so many people, and with the bad weather, a lot of flights had to be canceled. It is just crazy how much people are flying right now.
Yeah, it's something that we're watching, and we've got some advanced analytics that we're paying attention to. We have a couple of measures that are kind of predictive measures for us, and really what we're expecting right now is the next 2 or 3 weeks are going to be very tough. We expect the numbers to continue to increase over the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then if we can get past that spring break wave, then we expect them to hopefully go back down as we continue to roll out more vaccinations. So, we've been ramping up for this. So for the last couple of weeks, we've seen this coming. As we've opened up some additional spaces, we're trying to bring in some additional staffing, and really putting in our emergency plans that we used last spring when we were in this place. So it keeps me up at night. It keeps my team up at night, and but I would say we're much better prepared this time around because we know what it looks like.
Eric Wallace with us here on the Megacast. He's the president for Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital. Not to get into politics of all of this because you guys are just on the front lines trying to save lives, but the governor's decision to say that we're going to try to vaccinate our way out of the surge rather than putting in more restrictions, your thoughts?
Good question. I think I would love to believe that as a society we can do the right thing and kind of pull back and make sure that people are wearing masks, staying out of group settings, washing their hands, doing social distancing. I think the unfortunate thing is we've proven that we can't. And so I think I and others in the healthcare industry would really welcome the governor stepping in and putting some of those restrictions back into place. We certainly understand that it's absolutely a balance. We rely on local businesses and industries. I would tell you that we, as we've come out of this, we've tried to do everything we can do to support our local, restaurants and small businesses because they supported us so well the first time through this. But we're not in a place where I think we're trying to advocate that things need to be completely closed. But certainly would like to see some of those capacity limits maybe be really brought back and some more thoughtfulness about what folks are doing out when they're out and about in public.
Well, we know it's going to be a tough couple of weeks for you and your staff members. We want to, again, thank you for your time and also sharing your knowledge with us as well. It helps clear up so much confusion because a year into this, and it is still day by day, and things continue to change. Eric Wallace with us on the Megacast. Anything I maybe didn't ask that you want to add before we say goodbye?
No, Ronnie, I just want to say thank you for supporting us with that Henry Ford blue that you're wearing there.
Anytime. I'll remember that every time you're on, okay?
That's right. Absolutely.
Eric Wallace with us, President Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital. Healthcare workers are really having a tough time. I know my neighbor works on the front lines as well with Beaumont, and they're just exhausted. So if anything, please be kind to them. If you know anyone, let's continue to support them like we did it back at the beginning of this pandemic, Tyler.
Yeah, they're working harder than ever right now because the situation in Michigan is very serious. It's continuing to get more serious. And as we've discussed many times over the last several weeks, we're still very much in the spring break period. And with people coming back now from that, the case numbers may continue to increase with that as well. And there aren't restrictions in place. People are being trusted to take those precautions themselves. And we've seen from several health systems that have taken severe precautions and have eliminated visitors, eliminated elective procedures and are at full capacity or beyond that. They're really at the brink right now where they're surviving and they're getting by and they're continuing to do great work. But if we don't get this under control, they're going to be in a very tough position and we don't need to be putting them in that position.
Exactly. Hey, we're going to take a quick break, but about 40 minutes left in the show. Still a lot to get to here on the Megacast. When we come back, we are going to be speaking with the district manager for blood donations for the American Red Cross. This is the Megacast.
Quitting smoking can improve your health, but it also protects your loved ones from secondhand smoke. Did you know there's no risk-free level of exposure to secondhand smoke? Smoke from cigarettes, e-cigs, and hookah can travel through ventilation systems and harm those around you. So clear the air and stop secondhand smoke. Call the Michigan Tobacco Quit Line at 1-800-784-8669. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
I want to get back to seeing my grandbabies every Sunday and smothering them with big hugs and kisses.
I want to get back to football games with my boys.
I want to get back to feeling and touching, connecting with the people around me.
I want to get back to family dinners and my grandma's mac and cheese.
I want to get back to real grocery shopping, taking my time, walking down every aisle, smelling the tomatoes and melons, having a free sample or two, or 3.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. But now, there are vaccines. And they are the first step that let us get back to feeling optimistic about the days ahead of us. It's okay to have questions.
Is it safe?
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Now, get the facts. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Great to have you with us here on the Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl in the studios alongside Mr. Tyler Keith. As a reminder, you can always catch us Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access. You can also catch us on Channel 15 if you have Comcast, 99 on AT&T, or listen to us on the radio, 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 FM The Beth. And then today we are also live streaming today's edition of the Megacast on the Walled Lake Consolidated School District's Facebook page. We want to say thank you to them, and we'll be speaking with their superintendent coming up here in about 20 minutes. But before we get to him, American Red Cross, they've been around for so long. They do so much for our communities as well. And it's a little tough right now because think about all the offices that are not returning. People are not in the office, or it's not back to capacity. And there were so many blood drives.
Yes.
That would happen in office places or, out at wherever. But of course, just like everything else, they've had to take a bit of a pause, but they still need your blood. To talk a little bit more, let's bring in Dennis Sandoval. He's the district manager for blood donations for the Michigan Region American Red Cross. Thank you so much, Dennis, for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you having us on and helping to promote the need of blood and blood donations even during this COVID time that we are going through in the state.
So how hard has it been for you and your team over the past year?
Well, it's been very difficult because we have to find locations. As you mentioned, we normally go into corporations, schools, and so on that aren't in session in many cases or aren't coming to the office in many cases. My wife is one of them. She doesn't go to the office anymore, so we both work from our home offices now, and we do get out once in a while. So it is hard to find these locations that are large enough because we do have safety measures in place with 6-foot social distancing between our health history stations, between our beds and so on, and then just to keep everybody safe. And so we have to have these separations in larger rooms than we normally would be able to fit a blood drive into on a regular basis.
And because what goes into actually hosting a blood drive? Because you have to set up the facility.
That is correct. We bring everything to the blood drive. I mean, we supply the beds, we supply the computers, health history stations. We now, of course, since COVID, now have a temperature monitoring station. So when people walk in, they'll find before they even enter the blood drive, they come in and they'll get their temperature taken. So we come in about, if we set up a blood drive, say noon to 6, we'd come in about 45 minutes to an hour before that to get everything set up, get all the equipment out and taken care of. And then we have the sponsors there that will help schedule the appointments. So they'll be calling donors and bringing them in if it's a church or something, they'll call their members and bring them in. If it is a community center, then it's done we have a tele-recruitment team that would be making positive phone calls to donors and things of that nature to get them to come in. So the main thing is for people to allow us to come in, open their doors, give us the facility to run it. As long as we have enough outlets and so on in the facility, we can do it. We'll take care of setting everything up. We, of course, even bring the snacks and the drinks, which seem to be a lot of the most important part with donors sometimes is, they want those cookies and the orange juice at the end of the donation process.
Yep, I want the cookies.
Yeah.
It's all about the cookies.
Yes, they are very tasty, let me tell you. I always recommend the Nutter Butters. Those are my favorites.
Well, and it makes you feel like you earned your good deed. So,
yeah.
But Dennis, what is the need right now?
Well, the need is constant. I mean, there's constant need. Every couple of seconds, there's hundreds of people need blood donations in the hospitals and so on. So we need to keep those that blood on the shelf. Biggest need is and I'm sure if anybody listening has O positive or O negative blood, they know that's one of the biggest. That's The O negative can go to anybody in case of an emergency. So if there's an emergency, a car accident or something like that, somebody comes in, needs a unit of blood, that hospital is going to reach for that O negative blood on the shelf so they can get a unit of blood into somebody who needs it quickly before they type the blood. And then O positive blood, even though that, some people that may have a negative RH factor can't get that. About 87% of the population can get O positive blood. So that's why they say when O negative is the universal product, because that can go to anybody who receives blood on that. So those are the two biggest ones that we have, and then of course the other blood types are available as well. But the main thing is to keep that blood on the shelves for the hospital, so that when somebody comes in for surgery or anything of that nature, they have that blood on the shelves and available for them. So there's no delays in getting somebody taken care of and making people feel better while they're in the hospital.
So how are supply levels right now?
Supply levels right now are, O is as I mentioned, is always in a critical stage because it is needed so badly. So we are doing well. We are keeping up with our inventories in most cases, except for the O type bloods. So we do need those in, but that fluctuates on a daily basis, and that's why when we say that blood is needed every day, blood never takes a vacation, blood never stops being a need. We definitely need, even though right now we're in okay shape as far as our supply goes, we still need to keep that blood flowing in so that we can keep that constant flow going out to our hospitals and those people in need.
We're talking with Dennis Sandoval. He's the district manager for blood donations for the Michigan region of the American Red Cross. And with that, Dennis, how is the process now? Do you test the blood for COVID-19? Because we know some people may be positive for the virus and not know it.
Well, we are testing for the COVID-19 antibodies. So anybody who comes in, their blood is tested for the COVID-19 antibodies. So that would be if they've had the COVID-19 in the past. So that's something that we're doing through the end of May. We'll be testing for that, so that if somebody didn't know that they had it, and then we'll test their blood when they come in, and then they may have had it, they may have been asymptomatic and come in, and they would find out that they have it because they have the antibodies in them. For the most part, when they're coming in, that's why we test for the temperatures. That's why we have the temperature testing station at the door before they even come in to donate blood. Before they enter the donor room, their temperature is checked for that. So we're always making sure that they are not showing symptoms of the disease when they come in or come in to donate. And one of the main questions we ask is, are you feeling well today? And that is the big factor, that when a donor comes in to donate, that they answer that honestly. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I'm starting to get a scratchy throat, or I'm starting to get I'm not feeling perfect today. Then maybe you want to come back at another day and donate. We still want your blood, but we also need you to be healthy and safe when you're coming in.
So how can people find out about where the latest blood drive is happening?
Well, the best place to go is our donor site, redcrossblood.org, is where you would go. Up in the, I believe it's up in the upper right-hand corner, it says search for a blood drive. You could type in your zip code, and that will bring up a list of donor centers that we have. We have fixed sites. We have 5 fixed sites around the area that people can go to donate. We also have mobile blood drives that are located in various spots throughout the metropolitan Detroit area, outstate, Flint as well, and so on. So they can always find a blood drive near them, and that automatically gives them the closest site to them where they can make an appointment to come in and donate. And that is the best way to do it. And they can set up their appointment right there. I highly recommend setting an appointment, because the good thing is we do have quite a few people coming in to donate on a regular basis. We always need more. We have seen a little bit of a downturn with the weather, getting better. So people, as you know, have been cooped up for over a year now. So the minute that sun comes out and it's 70 degrees, we do see a little bit of a downturn in people, even if they have appointments, sometimes showing up for appointments. So make sure you set up an appointment, and please do whatever you can to get to that blood drive and donate. on that day.
Well, and I know there are a few national things going on right now. If you give blood between the 1st and the 15th, you can enter to win a trip for 4 to the 2022 Indy 500, because that's hopeful. That's like we're going to be on the backside of this pandemic and we can be around people again.
That is correct. Yes, that'll be nice. And we also, we just came off, those where they could win a trip to next year's Super Bowl, donating blood. That was just a giveaway. In fact, I believe it was somebody local from Michigan that won that trip. So that was it's always nice to hear when somebody from our local state here wins something. So that was a nice little giveaway that we had too. So there's always something. There's Amazon gift cards are coming. Are going to be coming out to certain donors. I know we have a sickle cell initiative now going on because we're trying to increase our donors, our black donors population. We were quite low in that, so we have a sickle cell promotion going now in some select blood drives that are trying to close the sickle cell gap. So there's also a $10 Amazon gift card out there that people can get. So there's a one drive tomorrow that I might mention at the Charles Wright African American Museum in Detroit. Actually, that's on Thursday. I apologize. So people could always go and make appointments for that and come out and donate there, and they get a $10 Amazon gift card to come and helping us close that sickle cell gap.
That's awesome. And while you're there, check out the Tuskegee Airmen exhibit. It has moved over to the Charles H. Wright Museum. With that, Dennis, too, how does the blood donation help with sickle cell?
Well, the biggest thing with sickle cell, and I'm don't know how aware everybody is about what sickle cell does. Sickle cell, of course, it is just what the name is. Your red blood cells become a sickle-shaped cell. They're intermingled with your regular red blood cells, which are if you remember back in grade school days, they described as little donut-shaped cells. Sickle cells kind of hook together, and they block blood vessels and so on in the body as they're traveling through the body, and that causes the patients some extreme pain. It can cause them to become lightheaded and so on, and it could even get so bad as it can cause a stroke in children as young as 12 and 13 years of age with this disease. So a blood donation helps increase that oxygen flow throughout the body, gets that back up to a normal level. And the difference is that sickle cell patients have this constant need for blood. A typical sickle cell patient in a yearly basis can use over 100 units of blood per year. Almost probably like 10 per month, and about 100, a little over 120 for the year as far as treatment for the disease, because this is a constant thing that they need to replace the blood cells and get those healthy red blood cells in there so they can function normally.
So it's so important for us to continue to donate. I know a lot of people have been hesitant to do so right now because of the pandemic, but it's like you said, we always need blood.
Yes, and we have taken extreme measures to make sure that everybody is safe. As I mentioned earlier, we have the beds positioned 6 feet apart. We position our health history booths now when people come in. They're all separated by 6 feet to make sure that spacing is done well. All the equipment is wiped down in between donors and sanitized. The beds are wiped down. It does take a little bit longer sometimes because of that, but we're doing whatever we can to be safe and make sure our donors are safe because they're out there, doing us a favor and doing the society a favor by donating blood and helping save lives across the country. And so we want to make sure we keep them safe, because we don't want anything happening to them when they come in to donate blood. We're doing everything we can to keep things safe when they come in.
Dennis Sandoval with us here on the Megacast. He's district manager for blood donations for the Michigan region of the American Red Cross. Dennis, we appreciate your time. Anything maybe I didn't ask you that you want to share before we say goodbye?
Well, I wanted to touch a little bit more on our sickle cell initiative. As I mentioned, we have a goal by the end of by December 31st, 2024. We want to triple our African American donor base to help with that sickle cell gap, closing that sickle cell gap. It's very important to have Black donors come in and donate their blood because of the factors that everybody's aware of, the A, B, O, and so on, the different blood types that everybody's knows about, but there are different antigens that come. And one thing, for instance, is with the African American blood is that CEK negative is very important. And with that sickle cell patient getting so many units of blood, it's very important to get closer matches to those sickle cell patients because they can develop, antigens to fight off these transfusions. And so it's very important to have somebody that's a closer match as far as the antigens go in the blood. And so because we don't want the treatment to become worse than the disease, we want that treatment to help and not hurt that patient. And that's why it's very important to increase our Black donor base and get more African Americans in to donate blood on a regular basis.
Well, save a life, donate blood. Dennis, we appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I appreciate you having us on, and please do whatever we can, folks, to come on in and donate blood with us.
Absolutely. Redcross.org is where you can find more information about some of the local blood drives as well. We're going to take a quick break here on the show. When we come back, we'll be joined by the superintendent for the Walled Lake Consolidated School District. This is the Megacast.
Over a decade ago, the journey to a COVID vaccine began. Building upon research on other coronaviruses, scientists continued with months of research and development, 3 phases of clinical trials with tens of thousands of diverse volunteers, then peer review and authorization to deliver a safe and effective vaccine that will protect all of us. Discover the facts for yourself at michigan.gov/COVID vaccine.
Quitting smoking can improve your health, but it also protects your loved ones from secondhand smoke. Did you know there's no risk-free level of exposure to secondhand smoke? Smoke from cigarettes, e-cigs, and hookah can travel through ventilation systems and harm those around you. So clear the air and stop secondhand smoke. Call the Michigan Tobacco Quit Line at 1-800-784-8669. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Wearing a mask is more than protection. It's a bridge to better days. The path back to celebrations with family. Nights out on the town with friends. Game days with your favorite sports teams. And the thrill of live concerts. But until we can all get the COVID-19 vaccine and build community immunity, which will take time, we all need to continue to stay careful. Because Michigan's recovery is depending on you, and so are your family, friends, and neighbors. So even after you're vaccinated, wear a mask, avoid large gatherings, and social distance. One day in the near future, we will all be able to put this pandemic behind us. But until then, spread hope, not COVID. Learn more at michigan.gov/coronavirus. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday to be with us here on the Megacast. What a show today.
Yeah, we've had a really good show today, Ronnie. We've had a lot of really interesting guests on to talk about the context of the big stories today, particularly the situation with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and what's going on in our hospitals, but also more around our communities as COVID-19 continues to have a major impact here in the state of Michigan.
And of course, one of the big discussions right now is surrounding our schools, because the governor recently did make the recommendation for schools to possibly close for 2 weeks for remote learning due to the surge in cases here in the state of Michigan. But some schools are not doing it. They feel for them, every school is different here in the state of Michigan. But boy, I have to tell you, it must be really hard for them with so many mixed messages. To talk a little bit more, let's bring in Ken Gutman. He's the superintendent for the Walled Lake Consolidated School District. Are you as confused as I am?
You bet, Ronnie. Absolutely confused. If I can expound on that,
we've been incentivized to return all students to school, and it was always been our goal to do so. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, it was very clear through PA3 that we needed to return, or at least our high school students, to school. Now, or that all students needed to be returned to school. And now, of course, the governor recommended last Friday that we close our high schools for 2 weeks and stop athletics. What you've seen across the state, and I would say the majority, overwhelming majority of districts, have not heeded the advice of our governor, and we've chosen to keep our kids in school. And there's no disrespect intended towards our governor. I understand the desire to keep everyone safe. At the same time, we're doing that. We have a self-imposed threshold in our district. If a building hits 10% of students and or staff who are either quarantined and or positive, we do close the building. We've not approached that at our high schools at all. And so, and what we're finding from our perspective is the transmission that we're contact tracing is not occurring in schools. And so we're comfortable staying open and hope that we don't end up closing our schools down again or being mandated to do so. Superintendents are not health professionals. We don't claim to have special knowledge in that regard. If it's important enough to close us down, then we should be told to close down. But we're very comfortable being open right now and know that we're providing a great education for our kids in a safe environment. And again, we have a threshold. If we hit it, we close.
I'm sure it makes for a lot of conversations with the parents and the students when you decide to stay open. You're having to explain just this over and over again.
It's confusing, and what we've learned throughout this pandemic is things change day to day, hour to hour, excuse me, and we must adapt, and we are. But it is certainly confusing, and it feels like we get mixed messages, and I'm sure some of the messages we send out feel like mixed messages as a result.
With that, one of the issues that recently came up too is we know standardized testing is happening, and so in the timing of those tests as well. Of course, the U.S. Department of Education did deny Michigan's request to try to waive the annual standardized exams. So are you doing the tests? Because aren't they like this week and next week?
They are, and they're a couple week period, actually, several weeks. And yes, we're doing them because we have to do them. The difficulty is throughout a year of a pandemic, we need to be teaching, not testing, especially when we've been told these tests don't count and then not all students really have to take them. We have to offer them to those who are in person, not those who are at home don't have to take them. Those who are in person really don't either. So we're spending several weeks testing students when really we should be teaching them, and it's not about accountability. The key is that we have local assessments, and we use iReady, which is a more of a national assessment or a self-guided assessment, self-adaptive assessment that's a better indicator of what our students know and what they're able to do. But certainly, yes, we're in compliance, Ronnie. We're giving the tests, and it's just unfortunate that this year that's a requirement.
Because I'm thinking from a resource standpoint, it's taking away from some of those other things that you could be doing to try to play catch up because of the pandemic.
It is for sure. This is a time we need to be teaching, not testing.
So with that, can we talk a little bit about vaccinations? We know that teachers were on the front lines. Are they more comfortable now going back into the classroom?
I think it's really an individual thing. I think you find a lot of people who are more comfortable being vaccinated, obviously, but there are still some who are nervous in any environment. And we know that the vaccines aren't 100%. It's really an individual measure. I know that I've heard from a lot of teachers who are vaccinated that they feel a lot better, and others still are nervous, but they're still doing a great job teaching our kids. Our staff has been incredible throughout this last year, especially. And nervous or not, they're in there teaching their hearts out.
So how does it work? Do they basically have like a monitor where they're teaching to the kids at home, but also teaching to students in the classroom?
It's different by level. That is our secondary model. At the secondary schools, there is a monitor, and they're teaching students at home. We call it the Roomie and Zoomie model. They're teaching students in the room and other students versus on Zoom.
The elementary level, we do have some virtual option that is not involved, that they don't have the students in the classroom at the same time. But yes, we use that model at the secondary level.
We're talking with Ken Gutman. He is the superintendent for the Walled Lake Consolidated School District. So as we continue to go forward, we know one of the big struggles, substitute teachers and just employees in general. Any movement on that front, or still a struggle?
Still a struggle. Substitute teachers, bus drivers, food service employees, we could use them all. And if I may just throw in a cheap plug, call 248-956-2000. Ask for our Human Resources Department and say you want to work in one of those positions. We will get back to you immediately. We are definitely in need of all of those positions.
Yeah, I was talking with a bus driver, and their days are long because with a hybrid model, they're coming and going. It's just confusing for so many people, and they're really putting in a lot of extra hours right now as well.
They are, and with the shortage, we have some of those people running our department, driving buses as well, and pitching in custodial positions and all of that. I mean, it's a really tough time to find people who want to do these jobs. And so we're grateful for the extra time they're putting in. They're hard workers, and we really appreciate them. It contributes to the success of our district and to kids.
So with substitute teachers, what are the qualifications that are needed?
Oh gosh, I wish I had that. I wish I knew you were going to ask me that, Ronnie. I don't recall what our qualifications are because it changed. These qualifications have changed over the last couple of years. So I could get that answer, but it won't be today. It won't be while we're on the air. But I know the requirements are lower than they've been in years. And anyone who has questions should call us, and I know that the people who know that answer will answer the phone.
There you go. Well, and I will say I have a girlfriend who, because she was, in retail and with the pandemic and everything, she was laid off, so she ended up becoming a substitute teacher. She wanted to be a teacher for years. She has a background in social work as well, and she loves it. So there are some people that are now saying, this is great, but how does the scheduling and everything work? And do you need like math teachers over English teachers or history teachers?
We'll take any substitute teachers right now. Our teachers leave great lesson plans, so they'll be able to teach whatever they need to teach and work with our students. But those who have questions about whether their qualifications would meet what we need should really give us a call. We're happy to sit down with them and share what we know and get them involved in our school district. And we'll take anybody who's willing to sub, who meets our qualifications, regardless of whether it's math, social studies, or anything else.
So with that, I know that there has been a push in Lansing to try to come up with kind of new requirements for substitutes to be able to open the door, because it's surprising to me, a lot of people now are not going into education, especially men, and we need teachers. But again, it's there's an education process, so you have to go and get qualifications, and they're trying to switch some of those. So maybe if you have real life experience, you could start to teach as well and not just be a substitute. Do you think something like that would help fill in the gaps?
It would help a great deal. I know there are some working on fast paths or fast tracks to becoming certified in education. The difficulty is we have about two-thirds fewer people entering colleges of education right now. Wow. At the same time, we see statewide the retirement rate for teachers is up about 44%. So we see a crisis on the horizon with filling education jobs. Now, personally, I'm doing my best to fill those jobs. Both of my sons are going into education. They're both in colleges of education right now. So those two positions ideally get filled, ideally. But we're looking at a crisis on the horizon right now in terms of filling education positions. And we're okay in Walled Lake right now. We're probably okay in Bloomfield and West Bloomfield and those districts you touch. But it's only a matter of time before those leaving, their positions can't be filled. There aren't enough people coming in. So we really hope that whether it's the fast track to education certification, a way to share how wonderful this profession can be in a normal year, those types of things would be, well, it's a hard year to convince someone they want to teach.
Most definitely with that. And it's like you said, so many people are retiring because of that. But I do think one thing that we have all learned throughout this pandemic, teachers are vital. They're so important, and they are teaching our kids in the next generation and our leaders. So whether you have kids or not, it is an important profession. what can we do to try to get people excited to go back into education again?
And that's the struggle. We need to be able to share the success stories and share what's great about the profession. We need to be able to sell that. And I don't mean sell that in a disingenuous way. It's really a great profession. And as a former teacher, I actually taught in the West Bloomfield schools. I loved my job. I loved teaching. And you know, there are days that are tough. You've got to meet the needs of every single child, and that's the goal. And certainly anybody who's considering it as a profession, I'll sit down and talk to them as well. I know Dr. Hill will, I know Pat Watson will, and Bloomfield. We're all looking to share how wonderful this profession can be. My hat goes off to and my heart goes out to all the teachers this year and all the administrators and the bus drivers and transportation, custodial, our secretaries, everyone who's worked this year has found it to be a struggle in education, but it's been a struggle outside of education as well. And so I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to consider a career in this wonderful profession.
So, Ken, what's been the response since you guys have returned to the classroom from the parents? I have a lot of happy neighbors right now because we are a neighborhood full of kids and a lot of relieved parents when they get back in the classroom.
Yeah, you know, we left an option for those who want to remain virtual, and those who are back are pretty happy to have their kids back in school as long as we can keep them safe, and we've done so. And, you know, we've had to close some schools, and we will again probably this afternoon as we approach our threshold, some elementary schools. But parents are by and large reporting that they're very happy their children are back. As much as we believe that we did a good job with virtual and do a good job with virtual education, there's no replacement for most students for an in-person education. And I think our teachers find more satisfaction meeting with students in person as well.
And because, too, I feel like they really get to know the students so much more, and they can see when they're struggling. It's easier than when they're sitting at home on Zoom.
It is for sure, and it's hard for our secondary teachers right now to see body language, especially if a student turns a camera off. But even with cameras on, when you're teaching students in person and virtually, it's really hard to be able to assess body language, assess feelings. You can hear that sigh when a student's had enough in the classroom. You don't always hear it on Zoom.
Right. Ken Gutman with us here on the Megacast, Superintendent for the Walled Lake Consolidated School District. How's the budget looking? I always ask you that, and it's like...
You do, and predictably, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is we don't have our budget for next year. And I'll be honest, our federal funds help. The federal funds we've received help us a great deal, but we still don't have a budget for next year. And I had a chance to ask the governor about 2 weeks ago if she'd be able to comply, she and the legislature, with the June 30th. We have to pass a balanced budget by June 30th. They need to get us a budget well before that. So I don't know that I got a solid answer in terms of whether we'll have it, because I don't think she knows, and the legislators with whom I've spoken are hopeful. But we would love to have a budget from the state by June 1st, because we need to submit a balanced budget by June 30th. So how does it look? I hope to know at some point in June what next year's budget looks like.
That's a message to the legislators. Work together. Come up with the compromise. Hey, before we let you go, I do want to touch on you have a golf outing coming up in June.
We do. Our Foundation for Excellence does a fantastic job supporting teachers in our classroom. Their money goes right to the classroom. June 12th. June 12th, it's $130 per golfer. It's a good time. You don't have to be a good golfer to play. I'm evidence of that. But it does raise money that goes directly to the classroom. It's at Edgewood Country Club, again, on June 12th.
How can they get tickets?
They can go to WLCSD.org/foundation. And go ahead.
And it's great. We can all golf safely, so.
Absolutely. We'll be outside, and I generally hit the ball where no one is. So it's all safe for me.
Well, that's great to know. Ken Gutman with us here on the Megacast. So we always appreciate your time. Anything I didn't ask you that maybe you want to say before we sign off?
No, I think as always, Ronnie, it's been great talking to you, and I just appreciate everything you do to help us share what's going on in the district.
Well, good luck to you and your team. I know it's not easy, and every time these rules change, I think about people such as yourself and the team over at the West Bloomfield School District, because having to make these decisions at the drop of a hat, a little bit complicated.
A little bit, but we'll continue to adapt. We'll interpret the rules, and we'll take care of our children.
So one of the things I will say quickly, coming out, if they pass the infrastructure bill, is addressing broadband. So there could be something good that comes out of this pandemic.
We would like that. We would like that a lot. And we have to take advantage. I don't mean it to sound bad, but we need to take advantage of what we've learned during this pandemic and look at how we offer instruction in the future. There may be greater opportunity for virtual instruction for those for whom it's a positive thing. And there are those students who really thrive in that situation. And we ought to look at when we offer classes, and can we offer classes at night, and can we offer them on the weekends, especially for our secondary students. There's a lot to learn, and broadband access would help.
And I will also say maybe recommend they need 2 computers, one to watch Zoom and one to actually work on.
That would, yes, absolutely.
Ken Gutman, we always appreciate your time. Thank you again.
Likewise, thank you.
That's pretty much going to wrap it up for the Tuesday edition of the Megacast. We skipped over the headlines today, but we do want to let you know they're on civiccentertv.com. Gary Peters made mention of it. The governor has announced that she is going to extend the restrictions on returning to the offices for another 6 months. So again, go ahead to check out civiccentertv.com, click on coronavirus, and there you'll find the latest headlines of the day. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate it. Thank you to Larry and Jake as well for all the work that you do behind the scenes to bring the show each and every day. This has been the Megacast.